the glorified, exalted Son of God, and the books will be opened, and men will be judged by their deeds according to what is written in the books. And another book will be opened, called the Book of Life, and men will be judged by what they did on that day. And anyone whose name is not found written in the Book of Life will be cast into the lake of fire. And I don't want that to happen to you. I don't want you to be cast into the lake of fire. I want you to hear these words instead. Well done, my good and faithful servant. Enter thou into the joy of thy Lord. He says, because of your hard and impenitent heart, you're storing up wrath for yourself on the day of wrath when God's righteous judgment will be revealed. He will render to each one according to his works. To those who by patience, hear that word again? Those who by patience, to those who by patience in well-doing seek for glory and honor and immortality, he will give eternal life. But for those who are self-seeking, so look, there's two different ways to live. You can live patiently in well-doing. You can live, as he says here, being self-seeking. The ones who are patient and well-doing seek for glory and honor and immortality, and to them he will give eternal life. But for those who are self-seeking and do not obey the truth, and what is the truth? The truth is a person. Jesus said, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except by me. They refuse to love the truth. They refuse to obey the truth, but obey unrighteousness. And look at that. Two choices. You can obey the truth or you can obey unrighteousness. And that's really what it's all about. Which are you going to do? Which am I going to do? Am I going to obey the truth, which boils down to obeying Jesus? Or am I going to obey my own mind, my own intellect, my own emotions, my own feelings? Am I going to obey unrighteousness? For those who do not obey the truth but obey unrighteousness, there will be wrath and fury. So I want to ask you here today, how do you want to be received by God? Because the truth is, every single one of us are going to stand before the same God. Every single one. Doesn't matter if you're an atheist. Doesn't matter if you're an agnostic. It doesn't matter if you're one of many 1,000 religions on the face of the earth, including Christianity. Every single one of us are going to stand before God and give an account of ourselves to Him. Doesn't matter if you're a white man. Doesn't matter if you're a black man. Doesn't matter if you're brown or yellow or red or orange or purple. It doesn't matter what color your skin is, because that body of skin will be dead and long gone in the grave. You will stand before God. I will stand before God. And the question is, how do I want to be received by Him? For those who by patience and well-doing seek glory, honor, and immortality, He will give eternal life. But for those who are self-seeking and do not obey the truth, but obey unrighteousness, there will be wrath and anger. And remember, at the beginning of the last video, I talked to you about one of the things you have to keep in mind as you read this letter of Paul is he had two audiences that he was speaking to at all times. He was writing to the church in Rome. He'd never been there before. He never visited those people. He didn't start that church. But there were Jewish Christians in Rome and there were Gentile Christians in Rome. And in Paul's letter here, he talks to both groups. Sometimes he addresses one and then he'll turn around and address the other. And you've got to watch the words, watch the phrases, watch the sentences, and see when he's talking to the one and see when he's talking to the other. Okay? He says there will be tribulation and distress for every human being who does evil, the Jew first and also the Greek. But glory, honor, and peace for everyone who does good, the Jew first and also the Greek. Everybody is going to stand before God. Everybody is going to be judged. Just because the Jews were God's chosen people, just because the Jews were given the Old Testament scriptures, just because the Jews were given the covenants and given the law, doesn't mean that they get a pass and that they're not going to stand before God in judgment. He says this judgment will come for every human being who does evil, Jew and Gentile both, but glory and honor and peace for everyone who does good, Jew and Gentile both. He uses the word Greek here. For God shows no partiality. In other words, just because Jews had the law doesn't mean that they get off on anything, that they get by with anything. They don't, and neither do the Gentiles. Nobody gets by with nothing. We all have to give an equal account to God. For God shows no partiality. For all who have sinned without the law will also perish without the law. Now, here we come with the two audiences again. Who were those without the law? It was the Gentiles. It was anybody who wasn't a physical descendant of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They were called men without the law, or the nations, or Gentiles. Everyone who sins without the law will also perish without the law. And notice something here too. The only reason people perish is because they continue in sin and refuse to love the truth. Think about that. The only reason people perish is because they refuse to acknowledge the truth and they continue to live in sin. For all who have sinned without the law will also perish without the law, and all who have sinned under the law, talking about the Jews now who receive the law, all who have sinned under the law will be judged by the law. For it is not the hearers of the law who are righteous before God, but the doers of the law who will be justified. So just because you go to church and listen to nice music and hear nice sermons doesn't mean, hey, I've got it made in the shade. I'm going to heaven because I go to church, because I do good deeds. No, It's not those who hear the law who are righteous in God's sight, but it is those who do the law. Now keep that thought in mind, because that's going to come in here a little later. For when Gentiles who do not have the law by nature do what the law requires, they are a law to themselves. Remember, we said at the very beginning, if you wanted to draw near to God before the cross of Jesus, you had to become a proselyte of Judaism. You had to be circumcised if you were a man, and you had to be an obedient servant of the law of Moses. But he's saying here, when those who do not have the law by nature do what the law requires, they are a law to themselves, even though they do not have the law. They show that the works of the law is written on their hearts. All throughout history, even in the time of Adam to Noah, Noah to the Tower of Babel to Jesus, there have been people who weren't Jews, who did not get the law of Moses on Mount Sinai. There are people who had God's laws written in their heart. They just, and I think that really kind of answers the question, what did Jesus mean when he said, let the little children come unto me and forbid them not, for of such is the kingdom of heaven. I don't know if you've seen it recently, but I've seen several posts on Facebook about little children hugging and loving one another. Usually it's in the context of, racism, is taught. It doesn't come natural, because you'll have these two little toddlers, and they're both a different color of skin, and they don't notice it at all. They just run up and they hug each other. Or they help each other. And they don't have any regard for what race or ethnicity or whatever. Why? Because they're innocent little children, and they see the need of the person in front of them, and they are moved with compassion to help that person. That's the kind of heart he's talking about here. He's not talking about some kind of religious observance. He's not talking about some kind of religious ritual or religious tradition or list of beliefs or lists of rules and regulations. He's talking about the motivation of the heart. For when Gentiles who do not have the law by nature do what the law requires, they are a law to themselves, even though they do not have the law. They show that the work of the law. Oh, wow. Listen to that. The law has a work to do in us. That's what it was given. And what we're going to find out as we continue to read this letter, the work of the law is not to make us righteous. Because what did Paul say? I am not ashamed of the gospel of Christ, for it is the power of God for the salvation of all who believe. For in the gospel is revealed righteousness from God through faith.